Right. Good morning, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, wherever you are located in the world. Welcome to this webinar hosted by FRAMECAD, and we've entitled it Building a Modular Future. My name is Curtis Edgecombe. I'm the EVP of FRAMECAD America. I run the US and Latin American businesses for FRAMECAD, and we've got some distinguished guests with us today. I'd like to introduce, firstly, Audrey Grubasek. Sorry, I probably pronounced that name wrong, Audrey. But Audrey's the founder of Offsite Dirt, and I'd like to just hand it over to Audrey, and she can introduce herself briefly.
Thank you so much. This is exciting to be here and to talk about these topics. Many of you may not know me, but my name is Audrey Grubasek, and I'm the founder and owner of Offsite Dirt, which is a media channel. It's a collaborative media channel for all solutions in offsite, including lean manufacturing, high performance building science, modular construction, panelization. So we kind of cover a whole bunch on our media channel. Most of it is vlogs, videos, content. Also, for many of you, you may not know this, but I actually was a modular builder with my own company called Modular SureSite in Denver, Colorado. So I actually built modular homes, and then I moved into assisting teams, creating pre-construction teams for builders and developers trying to get into doing their first offsite or modular building product. So excited to be here. I can't wait to have these conversations. Thank you, FRAMECAD. Thank you for the rest of the team, and I'll look forward for our conversation.
Thanks, Audrey. And next we have Robert Maxey. He is the facilities manager at Z Modular's Killeen, Texas operation. So Robert, I'll pass over to you and you can introduce yourself. You're on mute, Robert.
Excuse me, I apologize. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Robert Maxey. I'm the facility manager, just like he said, here at Zekelman Industries, the Z Modular plant located in Killeen, Texas. Been with the company now 5 years, 3.5 years as construction manager, a year and a half as a facility manager. Here, it gives me a great understanding of what we do, how we build, and I think we will be informative to you all, and thank you for joining.
Great, thanks, Robert. And last but not least is one of my colleagues at FRAMECAD, Andreas Schilander. Now, Andreas, you can correct that if that's incorrect pronunciation. So Andreas is joining us from Sydney, Australia. So it's very early in the morning there in Sydney. And I'll let Andreas just tell us a little about himself.
Thanks, Curtis, and thank you for having me on this webinar. Yeah, good morning, everyone. It's early morning here in Australia, where I'm located. My name is pretty good, Curtis. I would say Andreas Kilander works in English, Schilander in Swedish, where I'm originally from. And as Curtis said, I work for Australia. I work for FRAMECAD as a systems engineer / sales engineer, so I work on both sides there a little bit. I have a background as an industrial technician from Sweden, and I came to Australia as a machine designer, machine builder, so custom or special purpose machinery, I would say. But prior to starting working for FRAMECAD, I worked a bit over 6 years as design and engineering manager for 2 quite large modular companies here in Sydney, mainly with bathroom pods. And it may be worth mentioning both those companies were a client of FRAMECAD. That's how I got to know you.
Great. Thanks, Andreas. So yeah, great depth and breadth of its experience from around the world. Hopefully the content we've got for you today will be very interesting. And really this webinar is going to delve into the distinctions between volumetric and panelized approaches in modular construction. We're not only going to address the challenges associated with these methods, but also we're going to explore the transition from wood to steel, some of the panelists have worked in steel, cold form steel, and we're also going to provide some insights into the dynamic landscape of the modular construction industry around the world. We're going to just quickly cover off three major topics: the distinctions between prefab and modular, and then talk about modular volumetric versus panelized construction. And then we want to move briefly to the challenges of moving into modular construction, which, it's a difficult business to get into, a lot of complexity, but there's a lot of experience here that can talk about that. So without further ado, I'd like to just kick off with the first topic: the distinctions between modular, prefab and modular. I looked earlier this week on the Modular Building Institute website here in the US, and they define modular construction as a process in which a building is constructed off-site under controlled plant or factory conditions, using the same materials and designed to the same codes and standards as conventionally built facilities. But typically these modular construction is built in half the time. The buildings are produced in modules, and when they come together on site, they reflect the identical design intent and specifications of typically the most sophisticated site-built facilities. So that's a bit of a background from the Modular Building Institute and a definition. So Audrey, if I can just ask you, how would you define the distinction between prefab and modular? What are the definitions and differences that you see?
Yeah, so thank you. I appreciate it. When I look at modular construction, I think of it as a process. I don't think of it as I don't think of it as just a building. I look at it as a type of process. So when we're talking about modular, obviously with your specific definition from the Modular Building Institute, it really does hold focus, right? Anything that's really built in a factory, manufactured in a factory, that has four walls, typically is a modular type of design, and modular can be designed with any type of floor plans. It's specific to what the factory can provide. So many factories can do a customization type of product. Many of them may not. They may only be able to provide the plans that they provide. There's also modular factories that do self-development. So they basically build their own designs and their own developments for their own projects and their own needs. When I look at prefab, I feel like prefab covers another wide variety, which can mean components, standardized components, different product types that are going to go into a building. So they can be prefabricated in order to excel and make building situations more efficient, more prone to being able to put together pieces and parts. When I look at a prefab, I feel like both of them are used in very similar terms, but when we're strictly talking about modular, we're specifically talking about a building type. And that building type is basically, like you said, it's compliant to the International Builder Code or the International Residential Code as a traditional build concept. And the factory itself will have to be licensed in that state in order to provide the product. So there's just a lot more that I feel goes into a modular or a prefabricated factory as far as inspections and details that are specifically to that building product or that building part. So there's a lot more eyes on the project, and I feel a lot more quality control when we're looking at these building types.
Right. Thanks, Audrey. And Robert, you obviously work in a modular factory or facility manager for a modular construction company. What do you see in the differences between modular and prefab, and your experience and how they differ?
Well, you just have to say, just like Audrey just said, the definitions speak for themselves. As to building the prefab building versus the modular building, I see the difference being that, as she said, you are constricted, but you have freedom at the same time. You also are allowed to, the inspection process is much greater. So the product that you put out coming from this type of environment becomes a better product to me. because it is inspected several times. It has to be compliance with state regulations, or like Audrey said, international regulations, depending on where you're going with the product. Prefab, a little bit, I don't want to down prefab, because it's still being done today. And it is a product that is worthwhile. But to me, the new modular is the way to go. So that's the way I see it, Chris.
Right. You know, we at FRAMECAD have many clients around the world that do both prefab and modular. And you know, obviously there are situations where one type of construction best suits that environment, or you know, the conditions there. But you know, I think, Andreas, do you want to talk a little about your experience and how you see the differences, and particularly maybe with reference to some of the stuff in Europe and in Australia that you see?
Yes, good. I think if we start with the word prefab, well, we can say I would think of all modular as a prefab, but that prefab could be much bigger. I mean, conventionally, prefab is everything that is done in a factory and not done on site. But it doesn't have to be just walls, roof, or structural elements, but anything. Should take an example. Think of electric harnesses, for example, is starting to become quite big in Australia, meaning the whole electrical system is made in a factory with special click-in fittings. So it's done, it's assembled, it's tested, it's certified in a factory, and can then be installed by unskilled labor. And while this is not always cheaper, it's normally of very high quality and increase the build speed on site quite a lot. So prefab can be anything, I think, that is done off site. If we then go into modular, I think modular is when a building is mainly manufactured off site. So as I understand, we're going to touch the topics volumetric versus panelized, but it's when a building is built off site. And as you said earlier here, when it's built in a controlled environment and shipped to site. I also agree with Audrey there. I think the key thing with modular is that it's process driven, and the way I look at it, mainly it's a design-led business. It's a lot of work is spent on the design stage, maybe more than conventionally, but you earn these back later in the process. You also talked a little bit about material there in your opening there, Curtis, and I think modular, sometimes it got a bad reputation. I just actually 2 days ago got a friend here in Sydney sent me a photo. Is this the type of thing you're working with? And they sent me a photo of 2 blocks put on top of each other. And I said, yeah, it is, but it doesn't have to have. Modular can be look the way a building does on site. It does use the same material as it does on site, but it allows the manufacturers to have a little bit more innovative solutions, and we also have the possibility to use a little bit more effective tools that is harder on site, like CNC machinery and so on. So it's the process that I think is the key word here.
Right. Yeah. So great. A couple of takeaways there for me. You know, obviously, and I think Audrey is completely right when she said, you know, modular is a process. Modular construction is a process, and prefab as well, but more so modular. And as I think you said, Andreas, there, that, you know, it's a design-led process, which is really important. And, you know, it allows people to, you know, do as much as, you know, a large amount of the MEP design and through BIM modeling and everything else, digital twins, and modeling those into, you know, the construction, in the factory, which provides a whole bunch of benefits to speed and all that sort of stuff that we can talk to in a minute. So let's just move now to, and before I do that, actually, we should just mention that if you guys have got questions, anybody listening or watching this webinar have got questions, you can type those into the chat, into the question and answer panel in the webinar, and we will endeavor to answer as many of those at the end of the webinar. And if we don't get to everyone, we can answer those offline after. So please, by all means, ask questions as you hear topics come through. Let's move now to volumetric versus panelized construction. And can we, the panelists define the characteristics of those two construction methods, and perhaps illustrate some instances and advantages of volumetric versus panelized construction. So, Robert, why don't I turn to you, and we can ask you what's your, the difference between volumetric and panelized in terms of the characteristics and some of the advantages of each.
Well, okay. Well, so if you start talking with volumetric construction, you think three-dimensional models, pods, that sort of stuff. It allows, in the end, it allows for easy transportation. You're talking about speed and efficiency to be better prepared. And you're talking about a little bit about design constraints because of, like you say, when you're dealing with volumetric, you've only have so much. Okay. So you have a little bit of constraints there, but with your panelized construction, you're more dealing with your individual building components, whereas you can say you can have more bang for your buck when you talk about panelized, but in the same token, it's the same thing. You're talking about something built in a factory versus something built on site. The flexibilities of being panelized, it allows you to change things. Whereas, again, going back to the volumetric, you're constricted, but you have a design plan in the beginning. So it just allows you the different choices within the realm of the two, being volumetric versus panelization.
Right. Thanks, Robert. And Audrey, your experience, can you give us some examples or some ideas about your view of the differences and the different characteristics between each of those two, volumetric and panelized?
Yeah, so maybe a lot of people don't know, I'm in Savannah, Georgia, so I'm in the United States. So obviously things are a little bit different than in other parts of the country. When we're talking about volumetric, typically it is modular construction that is in a volume part of the form of building. So when we talk about volumetric, we're looking at buildings that are 72 units, 200 units. It's a volume of standardization or standardized product forms that are continuing getting built over and over again. So when we're talking about volumetric, when we were talking about technology and BIM, we're using Revit, using some kind of design asset. In any type of form of building with volumetric is always about the pre-construction team and starting at the very beginning of the project. So that's where we have our architect of record, our civil engineer, our structural engineer. The whole team comes together in order to create this plan that most likely will not change after we kind of pull all the pieces together, get the design, have the owner sign off, know that we're going to be running this through the factory, and then we're starting our process. So the cool thing about volumetric, from particularly some of the factories that I have visited and spoke to, I've probably got a relationship with 40 plus factories. You can typically build one box in a day, right? So you're talking about floors, you're talking about walls, you're talking about, a roof system, not in the sense that a total finished roof system, but, like a ceiling. You're talking about flooring and cabinetry and toilets and lights. So the entire box inside of it is completely finished. And all those pieces and parts are all going through an assembly line in order to create this design box, this volumetric box that's going to be shipped to the site. It's going to be stacked, or it's going to be assembled structurally sound in order to have this, all the components come together. When I look at panelized, when I think about a panelized approach, I feel like the panelized approach for a lot of builders and developers that want to use an offsite solution are more or less going to go into a product like that. It's very understandable. You know, if you're a traditional builder and you're used to building your wall systems and your frame systems on site, in order to save time and efficiencies, you're going to go to a panelized system. Now, the cool thing of what Robert's product is, having a steel frame product, or what FRAMECAD delivers, is that we also now have a structurally sound component that can actually be 12 stories high or be 15 stories high. We've got that structural capacity. Plus, the other thing I want to mention about both of these processes is that they're in an indoor facility. So none of the materials are getting wet. They're not getting damaged by the environment. And we're also reducing the amount of waste. We're also reducing the amount of people that are going to be on site that's going to be impacted by the amount of workload. So there's so many benefits to offsite solutions. And I think it's just a matter of, like you were saying, Curtis, what does the product entail? What is the project? What are we trying to achieve? What are our goals? And then let's try to figure out a solution, an offsite solution that's going to make sense for that particular project.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Audrey. And, you know, I'm sure Andreas can talk a little about his experience in volumetric and panelized construction in Europe and in Sweden and stuff. You know, here in the US, particularly in some of the northern states where, you know, weather is a massive impact on construction timeframes, and you know, this type of construction lends itself to construction in those sort of geographic locations. So, you know, some really good points there, Audrey, around the benefits there. Andreas, what about you? What's some of your experience in terms of volumetric versus panelized? You know, what are the differences and some of the advantages that you see?
Yeah, in my professional life, I've mainly worked with volumetric, but where I am from in Sweden, it's mainly panelized. While there is a lot of volumetric there as well, as panelized is the biggest of them too. In Sweden, about 85% of every detached home is actually a modular home. If you include panelized in these, I'll look at two ways. If we start with volumetric, I think the biggest benefit is that it is a complete module, which means all the work, or large, like a main amount of work has gone in the factory, which does mean less trades on site, and that takes a lot of other things like facilities for trades on site, like toilets, offices, a number of crane lifts. So if I talk about Australia, a crane is king on a building site because that's the busiest part. So nothing goes quicker than the amount of cranes you have. So to reduce the amount of lifts, all the waste that comes out of just building, for example, one bathroom is quite a lot. So single lifts for a bathroom is 11 lifts with a crane compared to one lift with a module. So there's a lot of benefits, but it has its downsides. So transport is of course a limitation, not so much for bathrooms because they fit on a truck bed, but for larger buildings. So you have, depending on what you do, you're going to have pilot cars, you're going to have different road authorities that gives you approvals. I know in US, for example, that's you're going to transport through different states, you need different authorities to give you the approval. It also have design constraints, I would say. Even if we don't want to, we think we can do most of it. It does have its impact on the design sometimes because you need structure, and another thing is that you may need more elements than structural elements, like a base, like something that you don't need for panelized or for on-site buildings.
Right.
Panelized is, on the other hand, very flexible. I don't think these many designs you can't do with panelized as you could actually do on site. But now we got the other side of this. So on site, you're going to need to build your bathrooms and kitchens and so on, which brings a lot of trades back to site. Unless you are very clever and combine the two. So I've seen clients who do panelized houses with kitchen pods and bathroom pods and kind of get the best of both worlds. I think they're all are good methods. It's just, yeah, which one is for each project? Yeah.
Thanks, Andres. Yeah, you know, it's a really complex topic, and there's a lot of, I think, as our panelists have talked about, you know, a lot of variables, a lot of benefits to both volumetric and panelized, and you know, we could spend a lot of time talking about those, but we need to move to our next topic. I want to talk a little about moving from wood to steel. So as you know, FRAMECAD is a you know, one of the world's leaders in automated cold form steel systems for production and construction. And we have a focus obviously in steel, and there's a lot of really good, really large volumetric companies building out of wood. What do you see in terms of the challenges in moving from wood to steel, and in modular construction in particular? And Andreas, why don't we start with you this time?
Yeah. Yeah, the shell. So are we talking about a business that is already in modular, or is it?
Well, it could be anything. I mean, obviously, you know, a lot of our customers, for example, are moving. They're stick builders, and they're wanting to move into some sort of panelized or modular construction. So there's, you know, there's setting up factories. There might be companies that are in wood building multifamily and buildings. For example, here in the US, there's a lot of that going on, and they're wanting to move into a non-combustible material. So there's, you know, that move from wood to steel. But, you know, in general, what are the challenges of moving into modular construction? And if, you know, if you want to talk about wood and steel there, that'd be great.
Yeah. I think based on my own experience, one thing that I've seen not only myself but other companies do is when you're moving into modular is that you pretty much move a construction site under a roof. So you keep the same processes as is if it was built on site. I think it's very important to start thinking of it as manufacturing, because it is manufacturing. Yes, it is of a product that has to comply with building codes and standard and so on, but it is you should look at it as manufacturing. There's a lot of things that myself didn't thought of in the beginning, like curing times. You do a lot of plans on how to build these in a production line and so on, and then curing times will get you. So where I was, we moved every bathroom, for example, every 42 minutes. And to do so, you need a system that takes it all. So you need to map up your production, every step, every operation, and make sure that you got a good plan. And when it comes to timber versus steel, I think if I talk about the benefits a little bit about steel, I'd say if you are a stick builder today, it is a very cheap and easy way to get your frame build automated. I think that's the people who would benefit most of this, is people who actually are doing stick build. If you already have a timber line set up with machinery and everything, it's not as easy, because those setups are normally very efficient. They are more costly to set up, but they are very good once they're these. So I think the ones who should look into this is, if you do stick build, these will be a very easy way to get a semi-automated solution that that's going to take away a lot of errors and mistakes and so on.
Right.
Another benefit is the weight. So not sure what you will see, but in Australia, our structured timber MGP10 is about 2.6 kilo. So the same start out of light gauge steel would be about 1.14, so about half the weight.
Right.
That's good for transport and lifting and so on. And storage, if you think that one coil, which takes up a square meter, so was that 10 square foot, that will give you about 1,000 linear meter of stud, or 3,300 foot of stud. If you put about 8 of them on top of each other, you get about 8,000 linear meter, or 26,000 linear feet. So how much timber would that be in your shelves to get to the same thing? So
Right.
storage space.
Yeah.
And
right.
Less waste is another one. Don't know. I've heard everything from 10 to 15 on timber. With steel, you might get a meter or two when you replace your coil, and you will also get some waste from your tooling, but it does not take away your linear meters. It takes away a bit of steel of the members. So that's another benefit, I think, of steel.
Right.
I think that's long enough.
And Robert, you're running a facility there in Killeen, Texas, a modular facility. What are the challenges you've seen, in the modular construction world? What are the challenges you see day to day?
We do see challenges. We are blessed to be able to overcome those challenges. Just like we said before, in building in this environment, it gives us a cleaner environment to work in. However, we do have issues that come upon us. Those issues can consist from, like we say, the FRAMECAD producing or not producing at this particular time, to shortages in the industry, where we come to a point where, we just can't keep enough stock, or whoever we're dealing with can't keep enough material coming in for us at that time. For as far as going forward, we've been blessed to be able to produce everything we've been asked to produce. Even during COVID, we were able to keep up. It caused us some shortages, but we were still able to maintain and continue to do and produce what we needed to produce at the time. Now, don't get me wrong, we did have shortages. However, we were still able to maintain. We were still able to do what needed to be done for our services.
Yeah, great.
Is it? All right.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
All right.
And Audrey, I'll close on this topic with you. In terms of, you've got a lot of experience and you've seen a lot of modular factories with offsite dirt. So perhaps you can tell us about some of the challenges you've seen in people moving to modular construction, and just give us a bit of experience from your own experience running your own company.
Well, I think with any kind of development, any kind of factory, any type of pre-design, securing your funding is always a big deal. Last year, we saw a lot of projects not go through because funding kind of held them up. It wasn't the factory. In regards to steel or wood, I think it's a preference of the client, and I think it's a preference of what kind of product, are you building? I think people have a feeling either way. I just look at it from the standpoint, what's the most efficient, in talking through what are your goals for the project. Many manufacturers are getting better about kind of what Robert said. There's always going to be issues in construction. It's construction. There's 200,000 moving parts. You're always going to have something that you're going to have to solve. But I feel like manufacturers these days, with digital technology and being able to move processes through their factory using lean principles, understanding how to effectively calculate time and data in order to see how things are progressing in their factory and getting better at those solutions. I think Modsy probably does They're probably one of the best examples of being able to have high output and also being able to get their projects done on time. That's the nicest thing about modular and using prefab or doing a steel frame. You're being able to calculate time. Time is money. Most projects through modular construction, volumetric, even a panelized approach, you're saving anywhere from 10 to 20 to 30% time on projects. Many of them end 4 weeks to 8 weeks earlier. That's construction time, and that's also time that's saving you on interest on a loan that you're utilizing for your construction project. So there's lots of variables, but there's also lots of pluses. I think the other thing that makes volumetric or modular so sophisticated is the opportunity of repeatability. When you have plan sets that are already designed and approved by the state, you can utilize those same plan sets. Obviously, if you're building it in different municipalities, you'd have to change code and have to realize how you're going to adopt those plans, but you can still use the plan set, right? Once you start doing one building and another building and start utilizing the practice of standardization, that's where your cost savings comes in. So we talk about savings on site, right? We have less material waste. What is it? 45% of material or 45% of landfills are filled with new construction materials. It's pretty insane. So any kind of efficiency that we can use that's going to target a goal is always going to be a better process. We also have a tighter building envelope with either one of these solutions. Again, huge plus. Don't we want to live in buildings that actually feel good? The comfort level's there. We're happy that we're in a home that maybe you can't hear everything on the outside of us. So just our construction and the way that we're adopting these better building practices is a plus. So when I look at what is the solution, do we do steel frame? Do we do wood frame? I think that conversation happens with your pre-construction team. I think it happens with the developer and owner. It's all determined by the project and the scope of work, along with how are you, what does the site look like? Site determines a lot about the project as well. So there's all these variables, Curtis, like we were kind of talking about. And again, I look at it from the standpoint, any solution that you're getting to use in a volumetric or in a panelized program, you're saving time. Time's money.
Right, time is money. Thanks, Audrey. That's great. So we're sort of at time in terms of the discussion. We have some questions online that some of our listeners or viewers have sent in. I'm just going to open it up. I'll ask the first question and just open it up to whoever wants to answer first. Why do you think modular builders, home builders fail? We've obviously had a few instances here in the US, and there are quite a few in Europe as well recently. But what do you think is the main reason why modular home builders fail? Audrey, I'll just flick it open to you.
I think that there's not only modular builders that are failing, there's traditional builders failing all over the world, right? In the United States right now, we're only 6% of the market. That's all we are. So what we had, 64 commercial projects in 2022. I mean, you're looking at smaller numbers. So when people see that, it feels more impactful. I would say probably the number one reason people fail in any type of building practice is usually cash flow. Is usually knowing what your building process is and making sure that you have supply chain materials, because that's typically what will delay your timeframes. If you're talking specifically about why modular builders are failing, there could be many different reasons why. Maybe they're not having an effective communication process with their factory. Maybe their factory can't fulfill. I don't know. I hear these stories and I always think, there's 94% of traditional builders that are out there. I can't see that all of them are succeeding. I just think that we're hyper-focused because we're a smaller part of the industry.
Right, thanks. Okay, here's another interesting question. And Andreas, I'm going to throw this one to you. How do you think or believe that AI will affect the workflow?
I think it will affect. We already see tests on software that actually designs, even actually within our own industry. We have trials going on with this, and I mean, like any new, or maybe AI is not new, maybe it was called automation earlier, but anything new, it would take some time to develop. But I've seen some really cool stuff out there for design, and I think it will. I don't know a time period, but it will have an effect. It will increase the productivity from a design point of view, at least.
Okay, great. Robert, I've got one for you. In your experience, in particular at Z Modular, what are the challenges involved in terms of operations, design, and compliance, and sales of offsite and built modules and structures? What in terms of specifically around operations and design, what is the process and what is the compliance process that you have in your factory, for example?
My apologies, I keep hitting the mute. But anyway, the design process here is pretty simple. Our engineering staff is out of Troy, Michigan. They take care of everything pretty much there. We have a staff here that aligns us out. When you get into compliance, we have a QC setup manager that runs everything. He makes sure that he's compliant with the city and the states. They are here on a daily basis, inspecting our modular buildings daily, so that they can ensure that they can sign off that we are in compliance with anything and everything that rolls out of the door. It's done on a weekly basis. As far as the NTA is done, and they come in and they do a great job. They do a great job. But you have to look at the people. The people have to take pride in what they want to do in order for the product to come out like you need it to come out. That is a big deal when you're in the modular area. If people are not putting in what they want to see, then what they would want to live in, then it takes a toll on what your finished product is. I have to give Z Modular credit. Mr. Barry Zuckelman has done a great job in how he has set this up, how he has structured it. It's going to be fabulous. It's fabulous not only for Zuckelman Industries, but it's fabulous for everybody out there in the world to see. And I hope and I pray that I'm around to see it in the end.
Great. Thanks, Robert. And we've got like a bunch of probably another 20 or 30 questions, or I think we've got 28 more questions that we haven't answered. So we will take those offline and try and endeavor to answer those. And we'll send out those to everyone that has participated on the webinar. I'd like to thank our participants, Audrey, Robert, and Andreas for, our panelists for joining and giving their insight and expertise. This is perhaps one of a number of different webinars we're going to do in the future. I really appreciate your thoughts, guys. And really, I think modular construction has a really bright future. As Audrey said, I think this 6% of the construction industry is currently doing modular. There are huge benefits to modular construction. Yes, there are limitations and challenges, but a number of huge benefits that we've highlighted, throughout the webinar here. And I think that's, all bodes well for the future of modular construction around the world, here in the US and Europe and Australasia. So a great topic. Not enough time really to cover it all, but I really thank you guys for joining, and we look forward to seeing some of you again on the next webinar that we have. If you'd like to find out some more information, please by all means visit our website. FRAMECAD's website is framecad.com, and you can find information around cold form steel construction, modular construction. And I'm sure if you want to reach out to Audrey, Robert, and or Andreas, you can find them on LinkedIn, and we can post those LinkedIn addresses online for you. Thank you again, and we appreciate your joining us today. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.